I never thought I'd actually, end up here, Sitting in my car holding divorce papers and just wondering what the hell went wrong. I guess I should have seen it coming, but, yeah, here we are. Hi, I'm Ashley, I'm 32, and this? Yeah, this is my story about, how one dumb joke ruined my marriage. So, okay, it started pretty normal, right? Family life, kids, the whole routine. We've got two kiddos, Emma, she's 7, and Luke, who just turned 4. They're like my entire world, But also, yeah, they're exhausting. My whole life kinda revolved around them. The school drop-offs, packing lunches, planning birthdays, and oh god, keeping the house in one piece. I was a stay-at-home mom, which I thought was enough. But I guess looking back, maybe that's where everything started unraveling. See Eric, my husband, he's 35 and always worked super hard. He'd come home late, dead tired, but he never complained, And me? I just unload everything on him about the kids, the mess, all of it. And somewhere along the way, I started resenting him. Eric was always the rock, The provider. He was dependable, steady, and just there. But I started wondering, what about me? I was the one at home with the kids all day doing everything. And honestly, I started feeling like I wasn't getting the attention I deserved. That frustration just kind of built up inside me. Anyway, it was a Friday night, rare for us since we actually got the house to ourselves. Kids were with my parents, and Eric was trying to be sweet, He made this nice dinner, even poured me a glass of wine. And we were just sitting there talking and, I don't even remember what led up to it. But then I said it. That joke. Hey, I laughed. You were my second choice. I chuckled like it was no big deal. But, Eric? He didn't laugh. At all. I thought he was just being overly sensitive or whatever, so I kind of brushed it off. Looking back now, yeah, that was a pretty stupid thing to say. From there, the vibe between us, totally shifted. It wasn't immediate, but, little things started piling up. He'd get quiet when we'd normally talk, and I'd, fill the silence with dumb jokes to lighten the mood. But it didn't work. It was like I could feel this invisible wall growing between us. Eric started staying out later than usual. At first, it was oh, I've got to catch up on some work, or I'm grabbing a drink with the guys. Stuff that didn't seem, like a big deal. But, it became this regular thing. And I'll admit I noticed. Really noticed. But I told myself not to overthink it. I didn't want to be the nagging wife, right? Till, there were these small signs. His phone always face down on the counter, more time texting someone, fewer conversations at home. It wasn't like he was outright ignoring me, but, it felt off. One night, I came back from dropping Mia off at a friend's house, and, I walked into our bedroom. Eric was sitting on the bed, texting. And I wasn't even trying to snoop, but I saw the name, Katie. Yeah. My heart sank. Who's Katie? I blurted out. Eric froze, and, his face, you could tell he wasn't ready for that question. Just a coworker, he said. But, the way he said it? Yeah, it didn't sit right. We argued for hours that night. I was furious. I couldn't believe he'd been sneaking around. He kept insisting it wasn't what I thought, but, I wasn't buying it. And the more I pressed, the more defensive he got. It was this cycle of yelling accusations and honestly both of us just hurting each other with our words. The days after that were, unbearable. Eric was quieter than ever, and the tension in the house was suffocating. He'd barely look at me, and I didn't know how to break through. I wanted to yell at him to demand answers, but, I was also scared. What if everything I was accusing him of was actually true? He still insisted Katie was just a coworker, but every time I asked about her, he'd shut down. And, that just made me spiral even more. I started imagining the worst, was she younger? Prettier? Did she laugh at his jokes the way I used to? One afternoon, I decided I'd had enough. I was gonna confront him once and for all. I picked up Mia from school early, skipped the coffee date I had planned, and went straight home. When I walked in, the first thing I noticed was, this smell. It wasn't anything I could immediately place, but it was like floral. Definitely not my perfume. I headed to the bedroom and, there they were. Eric and Katie. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, laughing at something he'd said, her legs crossed like she didn't have a care in the world. For a second, I just stood there, frozen. My brain was like struggling to process what I was seeing. And then Eric noticed me. His face went pale, and, I think that's when I fully realized what was happening. Who the hell is she? I demanded, my voice shaking, but, not from fear, pure anger. Eric jumped up, hands raised like he was trying to calm me down. Amanda, it's not what it looks like. I laughed, like one of those bitter, disbelieving laughs. Oh, really? Then what exactly does this look like, Eric? Enlighten me. Katie mumbled something about needing to leave, but I wasn't focused on her. I was locked in on Eric. You've been sneaking around with her, haven't you? I said, stepping closer. He shook his head. It's not like that. Don't even try to lie to me, I snapped, cutting him off. You've been out late, hiding your phone, and now I find her in our house on our bed? What am I supposed to think? Katie slipped out of the room at some point, and, honestly, good riddance. But Eric and we kept going. We yelled and accused and threw everything out there. Every resentment, every frustration, it all came pouring out like a dam had finally broken. I told him how he'd made me feel invisible, how I'd been holding everything together while he just drifted. He fired back about how I'd pushed him away, how my constant jokes and jabs had made him feel like he didn't matter. By the end of it, we were both exhausted, standing in the wreckage of our marriage, and neither of us knew what to say next. Eric sat down on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. He looked defeated, like he'd aged 10 years in the span of one argument. I stayed standing, my arms crossed, trying to keep the tears from falling. I didn't want him to see me cry, not now, not after everything. Look, he said finally, his voice low. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Didn't mean for what to happen, Eric? I snapped. For you to bring her into our house? For you to lie to me? What exactly did you not mean to do? He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. I don't even know anymore. I don't think this is working, Amanda. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you mean, not working? I demanded, my voice cracking despite myself. We have kids, Eric. A family. You don't just decide one day that it's not working. That's not how this works. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm not saying it lightly, okay? But this, whatever this is between us, it hasn't been good for a long time. I stared at him, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. So what? You think the solution is to run off with someone else? To throw away everything we've built? He shook his head. It's not about her, Amanda. It's about us. We're broken. And I don't know if we can fix it. I wanted to scream at him, to throw something, anything to make him understand how much he was hurting me. But instead, I just stood there, silent, as the weight of his words settled over me like a heavy fog. What about Mia and Ethan? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What about them, Eric? Are you really willing to just walk away? His face softened, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of regret. I'm not walking away from them, he said. I'll always be their dad. But us. I don't know if there's anything left to save. The rest of the night was a blur. Eric packed a bag and left, saying he needed some time to think. I didn't try to stop him. Part of me wanted to, but the other part was too exhausted to fight anymore. When Mia and Ethan asked where their dad was the next morning, I forced a smile and told them he had to go on a work trip. They seemed to accept it, but I could see the confusion in their little faces, the questions they were too young to ask. I spent the next few days in a haze, alternating between anger and sadness. I replayed every conversation, every argument, every joke I'd made that had chipped away at what we had. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I'd taken Eric for granted. The house felt emptier without Eric. Every little noise echoed, and the silence was deafening. I kept myself busy, throwing my energy into the kids, their schedules, the house, anything to keep my mind from spiraling. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the nagging thought that this was all my fault. Mia started asking more questions after a few days. "Mom, when's Dad coming home?" she asked one night, her big eyes staring up at me as I tucked her in. I froze, my hand resting on the edge of her blanket. Soon, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "He's just busy with work right now." She nodded, but I could tell she didn't quite believe me. Kids are smart like that. They pick up on things you think you're hiding. And Ethan? He didn't say much, but he clung to me more than usual, like he was afraid I'd leave too. The first time Eric called, it was late at night. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the divorce papers that had been sitting on the coffee table for a week. I hadn't signed them yet. I wasn't ready. My phone buzzed, and his name flashed on the screen. My heart sank. I stared at it for a moment, debating whether to answer. Finally, I swiped to pick up. "Hey," he said, his voice tired. "Hey," I replied, my tone cautious. "How are you?" He sighed. "I don't know. Just figuring things out, I guess." There was a long pause. Neither of us knew what to say. It felt like there was this huge chasm between us, one I wasn't sure we could ever cross. "I miss the kids," he said finally. "They miss you too," I admitted, my voice softer than I intended. "Mia keeps asking when you're coming home." We talked for a while, mostly about the kids. He asked about their school, their activities, the little things he was missing. And for a moment it almost felt normal, like we were still a team, still in this together. But then he brought up the papers. "Have you looked at them yet?" he asked. I hesitated. "No, not really. I don't know, Eric. I'm not ready to give up." His silence on the other end was deafening. "I'm not sure we have anything left to fight for," he said quietly. Those words hit me harder than I expected. I blinked back tears, refusing to let him hear me cry. "I don't believe that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We've been through too much to just throw it all away." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the papers again. Part of me wanted to rip them up, to pretend they didn't exist. But another part of me knew I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. This wasn't just about me and Eric anymore. It was about Mia and Ethan too, about what kind of example we were setting for them. I knew things had to change. I just didn't know how to make that happen.